So we will be recording. Yep, so that if you do need to run or it's so wonderful you want to see it again, we will post this up onto our YouTube channel in the next day or so. But thank you all for joining us for, like I said, our first hybrid coffee with the principal. So welcome to our in-person guests. Welcome to our folks online. And while our format is going to be a little bit different, our purpose of this meeting remains the same. And that's essentially to give you some updates on what's going on here at school, let you know what some of the initiatives are, certainly talk about what some of our COVID mitigations are, but most importantly, to make sure that if you came here with a certain question, that we answer those questions and give you the information that you need. We're off to a great start to this school year. We've been able to welcome our students back to in-person learning, full-time schedules. We do have some, like I said, those COVID mitigations we'll talk about in a little bit, but we really are off to a great start. If you do have some questions, for those of you online, feel free to put them in the chat. Mrs. Hanson is co-hosting this meeting with me, and she will monitor that chat. So if you put any private messages in, make sure they go to her, because I do not see those private messages. So check with Mrs. Hanson on that, and be patient. We do have an outline for our program, and so if your question is going to be addressed later on, we'll address it later on. And generally, our format for today is this. We're going to share with you essentially our 3-year plan that has been set forth and approved by the board. It's also called our LCAP, but it's essentially our 3-year plan for how we move forward. And that 3-year plan has 4 main components. One of them is how do we improve our academic outcomes for our kids? The second one is how do we improve wellness and health, mental, social, emotional health. The third piece of that is safety, and we'll get into a lot of what we're doing with COVID in the safety piece. And then the last piece is on parent and community engagement, and we'll share with you what that's looking like for this year and how to get involved. So that's kind of what we're looking at. But if you came with a question that doesn't have anything to do with those things, we'll address that as well. So feel free, as we're going through this meeting, if you have a question as it comes up with something that we're talking about, feel free to unmute if you are home on or somewhere else on Zoom, and feel free to let us know for those folks that are joining us here in the room. So any questions before we get started? Any questions? All right. All right, so we will start out by talking about our first district goal, which is to increase our academic achievement for all students. It was really interesting for those of you who had a chance to join our board meeting last night. We had a board meeting in which the board was appointing a new trustee to the board. And I wanted to start out by congratulating Kami Go, who was selected and appointed as our new board member. So she is a governing board member of San Pasqual Union. But what I was particularly impressed with both Kami and all of our candidates is really they spoke to the outcomes for all our kids. They spoke to the outcomes for the kids that are struggling and what are they getting. They spoke to the outcomes of the kids that are on target. They spoke for outcomes for kids that are accelerated and how are we gonna grow that. And so when we start looking at this first goal, we really are looking at all kids. And one of the ways that we're doing that is we have invested heavily in new curriculum for students. We have a brand new science curriculum, HM Dimension Science for all of our elementary students, has great digital components as well as integrations into the language arts program. We have a brand new writing program that we're using in the middle school. We're using a program that's called EB Writing, which is evidence-based writing. And so the middle school and the 5th grade are teaming together to improve the writing program. We have new math materials for both elementary and middle. One of the big things that came back when we were doing our surveys on the elementary side of math was that there weren't resource books. There wasn't a textbook, there wasn't a guide. When kids went to do homework at home, it was different than what we saw when we were kids, and parents struggled to help. And so we invested in some materials that are workbook style, but have parent guides and student guides on how these these problems are supposed to be tackled. So we're very optimistic that through more print materials, both teacher materials as well as take-home materials, that the kids will benefit from that. In the middle school, we're also piloting a brand new math program. So we have a program called Illustrative Math that the teachers are super excited about. They like it a lot more than the CPM that they were previously using. So if you have a middle school student, look for new curriculum on that. Also in the middle school, we've established a STREAM program. So those of you who have been around San Pasquale for a while know that we have a STEM program that became a STEAM program that integrated the arts. And now it's a STREAM program, which is integrating a research component. So we're looking at this cross-curricular activity, project-based activities that take in your science, your technology, your engineering, arts, and math, but embed a research component. And that research component will not only enhance critical thinking, give them more writing opportunities, learn how to do research, but also give them some choice and voice. And so we're encouraging kids within certain parameters to choose topics that have impact either at the school or beyond. So we're really excited about that. So the middle school team is teaming together for that. And then the last curricular piece, and this is looking about a year out, is piloting a new history social studies curriculum. It has been a long time since we've adopted new history social studies, and we use a lot of supplemental material. So that is on the horizon within this 3-year plan. We've also added to our direct supports for students. We took our reading specialist, which was a distance learning teacher last year, Mrs. English, and made her 100% reading specialist this year. So she's able to serve more kids. We added an instructional aide. Sylvia Uceda King is now a dedicated instructional aide to support reading development for kids. And then we've also hired our EL teacher, which was previously a 2/3 job, to a 100% job. And so we have Joy Zygan, is that how we pronounce Joy's name? Joy Zygan is our EL teacher, full-time EL teacher. And so we see a lot more direct supports to kids. One thing that we've noticed in COVID is that the academic program, even though we were able to get kids back on campus quicker and more than most of our neighbors, is it still wasn't the program that we've been accustomed to. And as we've moved back to full-time learning, it's really important for us to take a look at students' progress, take a look at if and where these deficits are, and support them. So we're doing that through some additional staff. And we're also have some programs in place to improve the effectiveness of our teachers. We've embarked in a multi-district E3 project, which is on educator effectiveness. So we're looking at how the teacher evaluation process works and how does that promote continuous improvement for all of our teachers. We are in a pilot program with a group called Forecast 5, and that Forecast 5 group is one that allows us to visualize student data and take data from multiple platforms and put it together. And we're looking very closely on where are we seeing outcomes in students that are showing both high achievement and high growth, and how can we replicate that across more kids. And so we're looking at that through Forecast 5. We have a teacher clarity initiative, which is working with teachers on what are the learning intentions and the learning outcomes. What are kids supposed to be learning? How do we know that they're learning it? And if they don't, what are we doing about it? We are continuing with our Kagan cooperative strategies, which increases engagement with students. And then we're working with teachers to create grade level specialists. And what that means is that we want, in the middle school, you have specialists in certain areas. You have your math teachers and your language teachers and your history and science. In elementary, we have not had that. So we want to build up a little bit more subject proficiency and consistency by doing that. So we've got lots of initiatives for our academics, but we also don't want to leave out the mental wellness of students. And so our second goal that we have is to build students of character and confidence. And really what we want to make sure of is prior to COVID, we were looking at making sure that we looked at the whole child. We looked at kids' emotional wellness as well as their academic progress. COVID encouraged us to redouble those efforts. And so we have a specific goal for mental wellness that we have not had in the past. And within this goal, there's kind of 4 planks to it. One of them is our MTSS initiative, which stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. And it's a very broad umbrella that's looking at if a student is struggling, if there's an issue with a student, how do we have a structured system by which that student receives the supports that they need? So if there's a student that needs a counselor, how are we identifying, how are we providing services, how are we providing a follow-up, and doing so in a way that has some consistency, so we're not missing kids. So that's the multi-tiered system of support, and we have a grant through, it's a federal grant that we received through the County Office of Ed, and that also has allowed us to have a social worker, school social work intern here on campus. So about 2 to 3 days a week, we have a social work intern. We have some support from the county focusing on those wellness goals for kids. The second piece of that is we added a position this year of a social emotional learning / arts teacher. And so Mrs. Reed Smith, who's done music with her elementary in the past, is now a full-time arts teacher this year. And she's using that time, she's meeting with all students weekly, about an hour per week. And part of that time is working on the social emotional wellness of students. Part of that time is helping teachers with what we call arts integration, which is taking the arts and looking at how it overlays into their core curricular areas. And then part of it is the visual and performing arts aspect of things, shows, performances, art pieces that they're creating. So we're super excited about that. The other thing we're excited about is the physical wellness of kids, in that COVID had kids locked up in their house for a long time, and there wasn't as much physical activity. There wasn't as much sports. There weren't these things that kids are accustomed to. And so we've repurposed our physical education teachers. So Mr. G and Mrs. Hansen are now seeing all students TK through 8. So they're seeing the middle school 2 times a week, elementary school 1 time a week. And so we are expanding the efforts to promote physical wellness in our kids. And then the fourth piece of this goal is looking at digital citizenship. We know that social media is horrible for our kids, and we really want to teach some of those skills as far as how to use these tools more appropriately and safer. And so we're looking at that. That kind of bleeds a little bit between our wellness goal and our safety goal. And so we're looking at bringing a digital citizenship program to San Pasqual. So look for that coming soon. The third goal gets into that safety stuff. And this is where we'll talk about the COVID stuff. But in that third goal, we're really looking at, the goal itself is to provide our student, staff, and visitors a safe, clean, and well-maintained school. And we've had a safety goal here for a long time. And that safety goal focused a lot on securing our perimeter and having our emergency drills and making sure that we're prepared if something bad were to happen at school, whether through natural disaster, human caused, we were ready for it. And we still have that piece in play. But obviously right now, we are looking at enhancing our goal to make sure that it's a safe place for kids to walk into. And so as part of that goal, we have already obtained hospital grade air purifiers for all of our classrooms. We've made arrangements to secure more for our common spaces. So we have decent sized ones that are in the classrooms, and we have double sized ones that we're going to be putting in places like the office and the library. So we want to make sure that the air that kids and staff and our visitors breathe is healthy. To that end, we've used some of our COVID funding to initiate replacement of all of our air conditioning units. So on all of our permanent buildings, we'll be replacing the air conditioners. When COVID started, we retrofitted them all with MERV 13 filters, so the high grade filters to make sure that it cleans the air. But our air conditioners are 20 years old, and they were kind of ready to be replaced anyway. And if we can replace them now and make our air cleaner for our students, circulate that air more efficiently, we're going to do so. And so the plan right now is over the winter break. We're hoping to do it over the summer. Unfortunately, the materials were not available, so the supply lines are a little slow. So we're looking to do that over the winter break. We're also continuing our commitment to outdoor spaces. And so when COVID hit and students started coming to school, we really wanted to look at how can we get kids outdoors more often. And so one of the projects that we just completed was a Kinder Shade project. Let me check this right here. So on the kindergarten playground, we have a brand new shade structure that has been constructed. and we've ordered some tables to go under there. So it does two things for us, three actually. Number one, the biggest complaint in the years that I've been here is that we do not have enough shade on this campus, specifically on the kinder playground. And so this gives us shade on the kinder playground. In the era of COVID, it allows us, when students are out for recess and lunch, it allows us to spread students out a little bit further, which is what we've been working on. And then the third piece is it gives us more outdoor learning spaces. And so if you've been to our campus recently, you'll notice that unlike years past, we have a lot more tables outside. We have a lot more places for kids to learn and be outside their classrooms. And as we started shifting kids back into school again, we've doubled down on those efforts. And so we've ordered some more tables to get kids outside. So if we can keep kids learning on campus and safe, we'll continue to do so. We did have a question that came in that says, my question is, has to do with shade on the playground. Since the shade canopies were removed, will they be replaced? Yes, so there's two areas of campus where we will add shade canopies back to campus. We have shade canopies in 4 sections of the school. One is out in the front, which we've put back up. One is on the K1 playground, which has been reinstalled. And then the 2 places that we need to purchase some more, they got wind damaged, is in the outdoor classroom in the garden and on the lower playground. So yes, expect to see those back. And then it says, will there be any new shade structures this year on the playground? Yes, we have one, as we mentioned, on the K1 playground. We looked at options to put another shade structure on the bigger playground. It became too expensive because of DSA mitigation. So when we build the structure, we have to get the Department of State Architecture to approve. And one of the challenges of putting a permanent shade structure on the lower playground is the pathways have to be ADA compliant to today's standards and not 20 years ago. And so the ramp getting down to the playground is problematic as far as building a structure there. So we've talked to some folks about maybe some natural options to do that instead of the structural options. But yeah, we believe that putting a larger shade structure down there is going to be a little bit more problematic. And then getting into COVID stuff, which is probably why we have our 50 people on the Zoom right now. So getting into the COVID stuff, let me tell you about a bunch of different topics, and then we'll take a moment to open this up if people have more questions about it. The big topic we're getting from folks is on vaccines and vaccinations. And so many of you have heard that a couple things have happened. Number one, vaccinations are now available to anybody 12 and up. And we encourage our students that are 12 and older, we encourage our staff, we encourage our visitors to get vaccinated. And we know it's a personal choice, it's a political issue, but we do encourage folks to get vaccinated so that we can keep our school open. Those of you who have been on these Zooms before know that our primary focus going through all of this is to keep the doors open and keep the kids coming, because the kids do better when they're here than when they're not. And so our goal is to create an environment where it's safe for our kids to be here and they can keep learning. And so vaccinations is one of those pathways to get there. There have been a change in law since the last Zoom that we had, which is a mandate for staff vaccinations. And so by October 15th, all of our staff, anybody working here at school, teachers, myself, our bus drivers, our kitchen folks, custodial, anybody who's working here at school is required to be vaccinated, fully vaccinated, or submit to weekly testing. And so the good news for us is right now, we have over 80% of our staff is vaccinated. We're hopeful that this mandate will encourage others to do so. We have obtained, created through Mrs. Lee's efforts, an on-site laboratory here, on-site testing lab. And the idea behind the testing lab is really, and I'll get into this in the isolation quarantine stuff, is to keep kids at school, because there's some pathways for us if kids are exposed to COVID to stay at school, and also test our staff. One of the challenges we're facing right now is the state is very low on their testing supplies. So we might be running into some problems depending on the need for our testing. We are fully up and functional and ready to go with our lab. We're just hopeful that the state will be able to supply us with the necessary testing supplies. But as far as our staff goes, come October 15th, they will be required to test weekly if they're not fully vaccinated. And current guidance has that on volunteers as well. So we'll talk about that a little bit later in the volunteer section. But folks that are volunteering on campus will also need to be fully vaccinated or to test weekly. There was kind of a question as to, okay, how does that look like and how does that work? We've been collecting vaccination status on our staff since we started, primarily because we wanted to be able to share with our families that we're doing what we need to do to keep school safe. And like I said, 80% of our staff has been vaccinated before the mandate came in. Now that the mandate is here, it's must be verified. And so all of our staff by 10/15 are required to provide us with proof of vaccination. And if we don't receive that, then they're considered unvaccinated. And that would be very similar to our parent volunteers. And so if that mandate stays in effect, we'll communicate that with our volunteers as well, as far as, okay, here's the vaccination proof, or here is how often that the testing schedule will go. So we're waiting to see. The guidance from the state and local health officials changes a lot. And so when we get to that first week of October, if that remains the case, we'll be talking to you guys about that. There is a question. Yep, there's a question basically about the mandate for vaccines. So I think we covered that one. And then the other good thing is I was participated in a call with County Health yesterday. And the things we look at is, we can look at our own vaccination rates here as far as our staff, but we also look regionally how things are looking. And as of yesterday, County Health reported that 75% of eligible folks in San Diego County were fully vaccinated. So it's above that 70% threshold that they were looking for. The downside is they're now saying they want that threshold to be 80 to 85% because of the virility of the Delta variant. And so there are breakthrough cases. So they're really looking to try to up what they thought was going to be a herd immunity back 6 months ago. They're looking at trying to get that a little bit higher. And like I said, our vaccination rates of our staff parallel that of the county office, of the folks in the county. Next thing I want to get to real quickly is quarantine versus isolation, because the guidance has changed from last year to this. And essentially last year, if there was suspected exposure, so we suspected a COVID positive person was in a child's classroom, that whole classroom shut down essentially for 2 weeks. And that was when you had the drive-through pickups and everybody going home and a lot of disruption. The guidance for this year is really focused on keeping kids at school. So they've given us some additional options to do so. There's still the same option that if there's a exposure, that there's an option to go on quarantine for 2 weeks and be at home. And we will provide, unlike years past or last year, instead of having a synchronous instruction, it's all packet work. It's all asynchronous. And so if a child is on a quarantine, we'll provide the work for that week, similar to a long-term study contract that we've done in the past. But that isn't the only option, because last year that was the only option. This year, there's what's called a 10-day modified quarantine. And in an effort to keep folks at school, students can, if they're exposed or suspected to be exposed to a COVID positive kid here at school, and both students were masked. So we're looking at these classroom cohorts. And we define the close contacts as somebody being within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more. If that is the situation, we can do a 10-day modified quarantine, which means students can continue to stay in school. However, they do need to test 3 times over a 2-week period. There's a sort of a timetable of when those tests occur. They're encouraged while they're at school to remain masked, even when they're outside. They're also encouraged that if they are taking off masks for something like eating, to stay 6 feet or more from others. And so we do appreciate the flexibility of it. It gets really confusing because in quarantine past, we would say, okay, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Here we go. Now, if a child is a close contact, expect to have some dialogue between somebody at school and the parent or guardian to see which path that child is going to take. That modified quarantine was really the impetus for us to create an on-site testing lab so that we can test students here. And so our hope and expectation is we'll continue to do so. Mrs. Lee and Ms. Zangiano have been fully trained and are ready to go. Mrs. Hansen as well. I will be soon to administer those tests. If we run out of supplies, it will create a burden on families to go get tested 3 times over a 2-week period. So we will do whatever we can to get those vaccinations in. Mrs. Lee, anything else you wanted to share on that piece?
Just right now,
Yeah, why don't you come on, or come on over. There you go. Microphone as much as I
well, hello, everyone. I just wanted to say that right now with the nationwide shortage of antigen tests, we are only permitted to test those that are on modified quarantine. It is the hope that when those supplies become more prevalent and more robust and are readily available the way they're supposed to be, we could test asymptomatic individuals as desired, because we want to keep our community as safe as possible. So I've had parents ask about themselves. I've had parents ask about younger siblings. We can't do that right now, but once the testing supply is up, we can start doing that. It keeps our community safer.
Yep, thank you. And then there has been, with all of this push for mandatory vaccines, because we're not the only place that has this rule, and in our education sector about either be vaccinated or be tested, it's putting a lot of stress on the testing sites that we have locally. The 3 testing sites that are most convenient to folks in our school community right now is Cal State San Marcos, and you don't have to make an appointment, but we're hearing that there's long lines to go. The Live Well Center, which is, I believe it's on Mission across the street from the Lowe's, does require appointments, so the lines aren't quite so bad. And then I had just heard that they're doing, and I don't know what the frequency is, but drive-by testing at the mall, the North County Fair. So there's some options for that to go for testing, but like Mrs. Lee said, we hope that we'll have enough supplies to do it on our own, but we're not super optimistic in the short term. They gave us an estimate of 6 to 8 weeks on delivery of these antigen tests, and we think we have about 2 weeks supply based on how quickly we're using it. So that's kind of where we're at right at the moment. Mask requirements. So I want to talk to you about the masking. The mask requirements have been very controversial, not so much at our site, but regionally and nationally. The state, when they came up with their guidelines, removed a lot of the other mitigations that were required for schools to open, and really put a heavy emphasis on mask use and indoor mask use in particular. And so they did remove some of the things that were keeping kids out of school, which was distancing requirements, barriers, active screens, those types of things that they found to be less effective than mask use, and put a heavy reliance on it. And so our policy right now is that while students are on campus and while we're indoors with those students, that mask use is required for all students, and that outside mask use is optional for all students. And so the policy has actually worked really well. I know that not all agree with it, but I appreciate the support for it. And I also appreciate the students' compliance and the staff's compliance with it. Because now that we've removed some of these other things, the mask use has shown to be effective and is really our primary prevention of the aerosols. We did have a question on, okay, so we had a question on the quarantine. So there's a question on quarantine that says, how does quarantine work with school funding? Very good question. There was some changes in the infinite wisdom of our politicians. They had written in when the pandemic hit they rewrote some of the education code, which is the laws that schools work, to include distance learning as a mode of instruction and distance learning as a mode by which schools can deliver and still receive attendance funding. Everyone hated it. Distance learning was not popular. And so the politicians heard that and they said, we are going to get rid of distance learning, and everybody cheered. And then COVID kind of rolled back in and they said, instead of distance learning, we're going to have independent study, which is distance learning. There was an old independent study model, which any of you who have been on a contract. So if you've been out for 5 consecutive days, either going on vacation or due to illness or due to something going on, 5 consecutive days, you could sign up, get your students work, and it gave the students their attendance credit, and it gave the schools their funding. And so they took this distance learning stuff into independent study. And the big changes to it are, it can now be 3 days for any circumstance. So if you have a child that is going to be absent for 3 consecutive days and you know that in advance, come see us, because whether they are out because they're quarantined or out because of a vacation or they're out because of something else, if those contracts are completed, then the schools receive the same funding as if the students were here. So when these students are going on quarantine, these 10-day quarantines, they are still, if that contract is completed, still getting their attendance, and the school still gets their funding. Within this whole merger of distance learning and independent study, there are caveats for providing synchronous learning for students that are out 15 days or more. And typically that was written in for students that are choosing not to engage in the on-site. You know, they're saying, I don't want my kids at school. I think it's safer for them to not be. And when we looked at that and talked to families, we had very few families that sought that option. They said, you know, we really appreciate all the hard work the teachers have done. We really appreciate everything you did while they had to be home, but we don't want that for our kids. And so within this education code, there's the ability to either provide it as your own district or to enter into an agreement with another district to provide it for you. So if we have families that do say, I want an independent study option, I want to stay home, we have an agreement with Escondido Union through their online learning program to receive your education. So it becomes an inter-district transfer to Escondido to receive that model. But right now we have not had any families opt for that. And we have all of our kids right now enrolled in our on-campus learning program. So hopefully that long answer to the funding question. There was another question in here that talked about, mask use outside. And essentially what this question says is that because of the Delta variant, they've instructed their kids to wear masks outside. And that's completely fine. It's an optional use. And if you come to campus, you'll see students and staff wearing their masks outside, and you'll see some of them opting not to. This question basically said that they were encouraged by an adult on the playground to take their mask off to get some fresh air, and asked if we could talk to staff about that. And so we have a meeting today, and I will let them know that students have that option, and we don't need to encourage them to take their masks off when they're outside. I can see maybe they were trying to be helpful, but yeah, we don't want to circumvent parent wishes as far as how that's concerned. I had a question about health screens. You guys all remember last year we had a temperature checks and health screenings in the parking lot. A little bit of a delayed when kids can be dropped off and so forth. We are not doing the active health screens this year, but we are asking all families to do health screens on their own, meaning don't send your kids to school if they're sick. If they have a fever, don't send them to school. Students that do have COVID symptoms, especially respiratory symptoms, cough, sneeze, runny nose, fever. If it's a chronic condition, if your child has allergies, go to the doctor and get a note so we don't have to exclude them from school for that. Otherwise, a student who is presenting as symptomatic is either out of school for 10 days. 10 days. Yep. Or they have the option to get COVID tested, and COVID PCR tested, And if that's negative and their symptoms are improving and they haven't had a fever for 24 hours, then they can come back to school soon. Our tests here at school are not the PCR tests. They aren't designed for symptomatic testing. So those tests would have to be done somewhere else. Right now, we are getting results back. Families are getting results back fairly quickly. There are some places that do the rapid and then some places that get it usually 24 to 48 hours. But we do want kids here. We just don't want them here if they have COVID. So that's kind of the policy for that. Hand sanitizer, we are very much encouraging students to continue sanitizing their hands. You'll see teachers in and out the classroom doing it, especially before and after meals. We're continuing with our room cleaning. When COVID hit and we started having kids coming back to campus, we added additional custodial support so that not only could we thoroughly clean rooms each day, but that we could spray them and disinfect them with an electrostatic sprayer. And so that continues to go. So we have not changed any of our mitigations as far as our cleaning. And then the last piece, there was a visitors and volunteers related to COVID. I may have mentioned before, but we're welcoming volunteers back to campus, and we'll tell you in just a moment about all these opportunities. But we are limiting volunteers at a time within a classroom to no more than 3. And the idea behind that is there's nothing magical between 2 and 3 or 3 and 4. It's just that we want to make sure that we avoid having too many adults congregating in the classroom. And then depending on if the rules stay the same a month and a half from now as they are currently, those folks that are coming in as volunteers, which is defined as somebody who comes more than 20 hours. Volunteers are more than 20 hours in a school year, would need to go through the same protocols as our teachers do, meaning either a proof of vaccination or weekly testing. Question on how often is the dashboard updated for on-site cases on our website? Very good question. We try to update those as soon as cases come in. So what you'll see on there is we've had 3 cases total. And when we leave this Zoom, I will be updating that 3rd one. So right now it says 2 cases, but you'll see at the very bottom of that form, you'll see when the last date was that we updated it. But typically when we get notified of these cases, we add it to there. So you'll see that. But so far, since we've been back, we've had 3 cases. Yes.
Last year, there was like a certain percentage where it was like, once we hit this percentage, you have to shut down. Is that going on this year or?
No, that's a really good question. Yeah, last year there was a formula that came out from CDPH. So if that question wasn't heard on the Zoom, I'll repeat it. And it was last year there was a formula by which if you hit so many classes that were infected, school was required to shut down. And I think it was like a 60% threshold. No, it was a 25% threshold. But no, they don't have that current policy right now. What's been really interesting with the change of policy is they have really leaned very heavily into it's super important for kids to be at school, which is a mantra that we've had. So they have taken away a lot of those triggers that would shut things down. What I foresee here at school is if we are recognizing that the mitigations that we are putting in can't control the spread, it becomes an unsafe place. We'd make a determination as to if all or part needed to be shut down and we had to change something up. The more likely scenario for us, quite honestly, is shut down per staffing. We are super thin. You guys probably saw my big plea out for substitute teachers. So if you want to be a substitute teacher, let us know. We increased the rates to $150 a day, $165 a day if you do long-term assignments for us. But the reason we put out that plea is we have very few people that are signed on with us to be substitute teachers. And so when a teacher has to not be here, whether through it's a COVID-related something, a family-related something, we're super thin as far as coverage. So if your child tells you that Mrs. Lee or Mr. Burrows was their teacher for the day, they're probably not lying to you, because that we are the next line of defense. And so we're really thin on staff. And so that is more likely to be our shutdown trigger. We're also really thin on our classified aid staff, the instructional aides that go into the classrooms, the duty aides that supervise the playgrounds. And those are really a function of the lack of folks in the labor force right now. So if you own your own business and you're trying to staff, you're probably having similar challenges. But if any of you want to work at San Pasqual, this is a great time to do it. So those are the challenges that we have. But it's a really good question, but we're not on a trigger. The other piece that could potentially create an issue for us is the county looks at if there are 3 cases at a school site, they look to see if, and within a certain time, they look to see if those are epidemiologically linked. Can't even say the word anymore. Good thing I have a mask on. But if those things are linked, meaning that they're spread, then they look at whether they need to tell us we got to shut down. Fortunately, we have not had any linked cases since this started. And so we are very pleased that most often a student or a staff member who comes to school, well, actually in every case, has contracted it somewhere else, didn't know they had it, and then we find out that when they find out, they tell us, and then we go through this whole quarantine stuff and isolation stuff. But we have not had any cases to date that have shown that a student coming to school has infected another or a staff member has. We are very wary of that right now, though, because the infectiousness of the current variant is much higher than what we dealt with before. And we are having students on campus full time. And so there is some concern that it could happen, but that won't be something we hide from you guys. So we'll continue to put things up on the website. We'll continue to communicate those things as they come through. Let's see, any other question? The next section is on sort of volunteer engagement stuff. Ms. Hanson, any other COVID questions? Okay, do you guys have any? Okay, I know it's a lot of stuff to pour out.
There's a couple questions about outdoor, how you do the 15 minutes, contact exposure outdoors.
Yeah. Is it on here or is it up higher?
It's on.
Okay. Okay. Well, let me answer that generally, and if I don't get to the specific question, let me know. Ms. Hanson shared that there's a question in there of how are we able to contact trace when they're outside? And the question is, we really aren't able to do it very well. There are some schools that have gone the route where they've had students that are assigned their seating wherever they go, and they have to stay with the same 4 kids in the class, at recess, at lunch, so that they can contact trace. We have not gone to that point yet, because what we're hearing from our students and our staff and our families is that if we can have school that is, and I'll say normal while I'm wearing a mask at school, but if we can have a more healthier, normal school environment for kids, that's the direction we need to go. And so right now we are challenged on outdoor contact tracing. We are a little bit feel a little bit better about the outdoors than the indoors for sure, because you have so much more ventilation, you have so much more risk of spread, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen outside. And so right now we don't have effective contact tracing beyond the classroom. And so when we look at contact tracing, if you're notified as a close contact, as of right now, unless we get information, additional information, it's generally going to be somebody that they sat within 6 feet of in a classroom. And so that's kind of the answer. You want to add anything else to that, Ms. Lee? Okay. All right. So if I did not answer that, please drop another one in the chat and I can follow up on that. Okay. Any other COVID questions? All right. Last one is our last goal that we have, and this was something we were not able to do well last year, is to promote family and community partnerships to enhance our outcomes for our students and opportunities for our students. And so, as I mentioned before, we are encouraging folks to come back on campus. Likely that they will be vaccinated or tested when they do. The opportunities are plenty, and we've been super pleased with all the groups that are reconstituting and kind of breathing some new life into our school. If you haven't had the opportunity yet, our PTO is head up by Nicole Vitale. You may have met her and some of the PTO board at back to school nights. They were here each night. They've got their membership drive on now. They've got real cool spirit wear. So I've been wearing my new spirit wear. Usually dress up for these, but I figure, I'll wear my PTO clothes today. PTO is very active and they are looking at planning some of the normal events that they have. You'll see a lot of our events are tentative depending on health conditions and whether we can do it. But as of right now, we're looking for our lunch on the lawns and our holiday boutiques and our book fairs and a lot of the things that PTO does to create a really positive vibe here at school, but also to raise some money so that we can kind of put things right back in the classroom, whether they're books or teacher grants or so forth. So if you haven't had a chance to join the PTO, we'd encourage you to do that. And our SP Foundation has been super active all the way through the pandemic. And so Courtney Bell is the president of our San Pasqual School Foundation. They recently, over the summer, backtrack a little bit. You may recall that when we hit school shutdown, Foundation came to us and said, hey, what is it that you need? And we said, well, we have all these kids that now need a computer to learn at home. And they said, yeah, you got it. And so they donated $30,000 to buy 100 brand new Chromebooks that we deployed at home, and it kept kids learning at home. And then as we were getting ready to come back for this school year, Foundation said, hey, what do you need? And I said, we're bringing kids back to school full time. We'd love to modernize our classrooms. And so if you've been in any of our classrooms, you'll see that each classroom is equipped with a cool looking TV like that one up there, a device called a screen beam device, which allows students and teachers to very easily wirelessly connect to a crystal clear display screen. And so our projectors in our classrooms were about 20 years old, and many of them required us to turn the lights off to see the board, which if you've ever tried to teach in a class doing in the dark is not the best. So we're super excited and it's worked out really, really well. So we really appreciate Foundation for doing that. They also have put together a really slick back to school video to tell you who they are and what they're doing, which emphasizes their Green Envelope campaign, which talks about the gala that's coming up, the Saints Soiree on October 2nd at Rancho Guajito Vineyard. So tickets are on sale for that right now, and soliciting out some help for some donations for that. So I do see Courtney Bell on here. Courtney, anything you want to add about the foundation?
Thanks, Mark. No, I really appreciate everything the school is doing to keep our kids safe. The foundation is always raising money to help you out in a pinch. That's why we are here when things get tight and your budget doesn't allow for it. That's why we raise money year round. So I hope to see some of you at the soiree. We are also going to be putting those cool classroom baskets and silent auction baskets in Trussell Hall the week prior for parents to come through and take a look and do some online bidding. And I'll drop the link for where people can purchase tickets in the chat if that's okay with you.
Excellent. Thank you, Courtney. We appreciate it. We appreciate all the foundation's doing. You guys are amazing. So thank you so much. Next, I want to mention our Red Barn Arts is starting to reconstitute as well. They were going to have a meeting this morning. I think it's postponed until next week. Yeah, so a week from today. So if you at back to school night, I'm sure the classroom teachers talked to you about recruiting of art docents for Red Barn Arts. It's an amazing program that really takes art and makes sure that we guarantee great experiences for our kids. So if you get the opportunity to sign up as a docent, meeting is a week from today. So feel free to come and check that out. They would love to have you part of that. And as I mentioned, Kami is now on our school board. So I'm sure that there's going to be a voice for the arts on our school board as well. So we're super excited about that. I don't know if Kami's part of this. I can't see her on my screen, but if she is, feel free to unmute and we can hear from you directly. The other group that we're looking to bring back together is our SAGE School Garden. So our SAGE School Garden stands for Students Are Growing Every Day. And we had a bunch of garden mamas that ran our SAGE School Garden and really built it up to some special things as far as farm to table and kids understanding where their food comes from. Fortunately, over COVID, we received some generous donations for the school garden. And we've been able to add to the garden. We now have 4 outdoor learning spaces out there. We have a stage, we have a paver pathway, we have a pollinator garden. We're going to put the shades back up over the outdoor science classroom. We have a peace garden. We have another classroom, individual garden boxes for all of our students. What we don't have is volunteers. So if you would like to be part of the garden, let us know. There's lots of opportunities. And like I said, we have some money to spend out there as part of our grants. And we're tying some of it into our CTE grants, which are career tech. And those CTE grants are ones that, how do kids learn to do something here that lights a fire in what they might do in the future? And so we are actually looking to team up with the ag department at the high school and have the high school kids come and mentor our kids here, and then have the middle school and upper grade kids be able to mentor the lower. So we've got that in the works. So if there's some folks that want to come and help us with a garden, we would love that. School site council is another opportunity to get involved. And so we do have, we anticipate some potential openings on school site council. We're not 100% sure yet, but we will be putting out essentially nomination forms where you self-nominate. The good news is I think it's in 25 to 50 words or less. So it's not a great writing assignment, but look for that. School site council is a super opportunity to have a voice in the direction of the school. So the school site council is a group comprised of parents, staff members, administrators, and we kind of review the direction the school's going, and we make recommendations directly to the school board as far as where we think it should go. And so if you are interested in school site council, look for that coming out or contact Mrs. Hanson, she can help you out. And then the last one that I wanted to talk about for volunteer opportunities is our Everyone a Reader program. And so the Everyone a Reader program typically targets 1st through 3rd graders that are struggling in reading. And we essentially assign adult mentors to coach, teach, and improve the reading of outcomes for kids. So if you would like to do that, we typically have volunteers on campus up to 4 days a week. If you would like to, it's usually earlier in the mornings. But if you're interested in that, contact Julie Carroll in the library, and she can tell you about that. And so we have a couple questions here. One is, are there going to be middle school dances? Right now, we have them scheduled on the calendar. So we're hopeful to have middle school dances. Very likely to be a masked affair if we do. So they're not prohibited under the guidance. So if we can follow the guidance as far as a way to do that safely. So right now, the answer is yes, we are planning on having middle school dances. The next one is any plans to get lockers for the middle schoolers? Yeah, the locker question has come up a lot. And right now, we don't have any current plans to get lockers for middle schoolers. Our students don't travel too far. Teachers are making some arrangements to have the heavier books stored in the classrooms. And then out here, we run into a lot of challenges with lockers because we don't have a place to put them inside a building. So they are outward facing lockers, and kids with food and mice and everything else that goes with living in the great outdoors create some significant challenges for us as far as that storage stuff, not to mention the cost of them. So those are the challenges for us. So we don't have any current plans for lockers in the middle school. I think that's the questions. I think I've got to all of them. Yes, yeah, one of the things that we're looking at, and there was a suggestion in the chat for an outside dance. Yeah, we were looking at taking the lunch area on the back side of the barn. So if you've been to the 2-8 lunch area, is to clear out all those tables and put lights up underneath the overhang and have a dance out there. And so we talked to the ASB who run the dances about that. they thought it was a super cool idea. So I think it'll address two issues. They'll be the innovators, and we can have kids at the dance safely. And so, so good suggestion, and that's the direction we're hoping to go. Any questions here on the Zoom, or any questions from you guys?
About the cafeteria line.
The size of the building or the?
The process, and now that we're offering free lunches, students are waiting a long time for their lunches.
Yeah, there's a challenge. For those of you guys not in the know, California passed a I don't even know what you would call it, a proclamation that basically says lunch is free for all kids in California at public schools. And so the good news for us in that is that we can offer lunches to all our kids. We do get reimbursed for those lunches, so there is not a direct cost to us as far as the providing that. It does create a lot of challenges for us. One of the challenges is that food delivery is very difficult right now because the major companies that provide foods to schools, and I'm sure to restaurants and so forth, can't get enough drivers. And so we have significant delays as far as the food that we can get. So it's likely we are going to be locally shopping for some of our food that we don't normally do. That's one challenge. The challenge that was addressed here is that our capacity to do it. And so we've added more staff to support moving through those lines. The challenge we have right now is that our building isn't big enough and the lines are longer. So when we have a lot of students coming to get lunch, we can't bring them all into the cafeteria. So we, or the cafeteria food service area. So we generally bring in kids 5 at a time, and the lines move very slow for our younger students. And so we've modified how we're offering the younger students food. We realized that 5-year-olds don't pick up salad with tongs very quickly. So we are making it a little bit more grab and go for them so that there's less of a delay. We've also staggered out some of those younger lunches to do that. But the challenge we really run into right now is on days like pizza day, where we have a lot of students. There's only a limited ability for us to get them through the door without piling them on top of each other. So we are trying to expedite those lines. I think as kids understand exactly what they do when they move through. So part of it's a teaching piece. We just don't have the ability to make the building bigger, nor do we feel we can accommodate more kids in that building because we don't want to mix up a whole bunch of kids inside. So yeah, we do have longer lines than we would like. We are looking at trying to expedite it. The structure of it is a little bit challenging for us to do so. We're looking at the potential of offering less choices, which we don't want to do to move the lines quicker. But we'll continue to try some things. But if your kid's saying that the line's long on pizza day, it definitely is. So, oh, yes. So was it just general question? Yeah, so right now there's a question about 6th grade camp. Let me look it up real quick to tell you. Okay. Yeah, so there's a question about 6th grade camp. Right now we're scheduled to go to 6th grade camp. You'll start to hear some information about it. They've made some changes to 6th grade camp in that they are not taking as many kids at a time. They have not shared with us what that current arrangement is for 6th grade camp. But what they did share with us is we looked at the possibility because last year's 6th graders were not able to go to camp because of COVID. And so we did a modified on-site thing. And there were questions about, could the 7th graders from this year go and do 6th grade camp? And they said no, because not only do we struggle with spots, and this is we meaning the outdoor education folks, but we're taking less kids at a time. So there's even less spots now. So they're only offering it to current 6th graders. So I would imagine that it's going to operate very similar to how it's been operated in the past, in the sense that they spend most of their day outside, and that the sleeping quarters, the areas where they are are going to have less folks in there. But the specifics, I don't know yet. Typically what they will do ahead of, well ahead of the camp itself, is one of the principals from the school or one of the representatives from the school will come out here and do a parent informational. And I expect that that parent informational will kind of give you whatever those COVID restrictions are. That could completely change depending on health conditions. They may decide that they're not offering it, but as of right now, they are planning on offering 6th grade camp, and we're planning on having our kids go. Pamela, any other questions that we have? All right. Okay. Well, I think that's about it. And I appreciate you guys and your patience. I always try to get I like to try to get these things done in an hour. So I know there's a lot of things. If for whatever reason you didn't get your question answered or there's some follow-up that you want, please reach out to me. Please reach out to the folks that are running our volunteer stuff. Like I said, we want you back. Our school is better when you guys are here and when you guys are involved. I appreciate so many of you jumping on this. We'll continue to do these as long as you guys are interested in getting information. And like I said earlier, things do keep changing. I'm keeping my fingers crossed and saying my prayers that they change for the better and we can continue to have kids at school, keep them safe and normalize their experience a little bit more. So I really appreciate everything that you guys are doing. I really appreciate your cooperation. I appreciate that the school community is not politicizing the health of our kids, which is a fabulous thing. I can't say the same for some other districts near us. And it's a testament to our school community and our school family that we understand what's most important, and that's keeping our kids healthy and keeping them at school. So I appreciate everything you guys are doing for that. Like I said, please reach out to me, schedule some time to meet with me through Pamela if there's anything I can help or answer for you. But I really appreciate your partnership. And like I said, look forward to welcoming you guys back. And for those of you in the room, you got plenty of coffee, so help yourselves. All right, this will be posted up on YouTube. So if you do know of somebody who wanted to catch this message or has any questions, we'll have it up on our school YouTube channel. But thank you guys very much. I really appreciate your time. Be well, and we will see you soon. All right, bye.